If the Nissan Qashqai were human, it would have some spots, it would probably have had its heart broken by now, and it would probably hate its parents, because the Nissan Qashqai is 16 years old this year, and this is the third generation. And you can say what you want about EVs and where the future is going. This is the car that outsold even the Tesla Model Y in the UK last year. It's still made in Sunderland, so it's probably one of the closest cars as the crow flies to Ireland that's made next door to us. This one is e-Power. So what is e-Power? Well, in very simple terms, e-Power is a type of petrol engine that has a battery that is double the size of what you'd get in a Toyota hybrid, for example, that powers the wheels of this car. So the petrol engine never drives the car. It powers the battery, which drives the wheels. And it doesn't have a gearbox. So to drive it is quite like driving an EV. You don't get that groany eCVT gearbox, strangulation sound. It's all very smooth and calm. But here's the thing, if you want the top of the range one in Ireland, it's €52,000. And that is an awful lot for a Nissan Qashqai. Let's take a big look around today in detail. Welcome to Nobby on Cars. This is the Qashqai e-Power. Now, I should say this is the top of the range one, so you can drop down into SVs and SVEs and SV premiums and all these different type of trim specs that come on the car. It is gorgeous. Like, take a look at those leather seats. The interior is really smart. You've got physical buttons and touchscreen for lots of things. It does wireless CarPlay, Android Auto. There's very cool gear selector that you get in the Nissan Ariya, for example. You get it in the e-Power Qashqai. And it's a lot easier on fuel. We'll get into that a little bit later on the drive. Just like every other Qashqai, the door is open at one of the best angles in class, which really does make it easier. I was lifting a 4-year-old in yesterday who really should be able to lift himself. And I just remarked to myself how easy that just makes life. It's just the difference of that many degrees, but it really, really helps. Kind of a flat floor, not fully flat. Again, very comfortable seats in the back. This one has a glass roof, so the light floods in. If you want to have an in-depth look at the Qashqai in general, a couple of videos on the channel, one of which, if you click here, you can check it out at the end of this one. So even though there's hybrid technology going on under the boot, it's still 504 litres, which is pretty good. The Skoda Karoq is a little bit bigger. They do still have this partition that you can raise to separate stuff in the back of the car, and you can also drop this shelf fully. And if you delve down deeper into the bowels of the Qashqai, there is a spare wheel, which definitely makes life handier if you do encounter a flat tire. And on the top spec models, yes, as you've already seen, you'll get an electric boot release. But will it stop to take off your hand? No, so don't try that. So it quacks like a Qashqai, but how does e-Power save you fuel if you're driving this car all the time? Let's find out. So as I mentioned earlier on in the video, the e-Power is never actually powered, well, the wheels aren't, by the petrol engine. So you have a petrol engine, a 1.5, working in tandem with a hybrid battery that is just under 3 kilowatt hours. So you're never going to charge that. That just is a self-charging hybrid setup. And it means that there's kind of always enough power. And what I really like about e-Power is you don't get this constant whine from an eCVT gearbox, because there isn't a gearbox. So in many ways, I mean, it's not to say you never hear the petrol engine, you do, but like I'm sitting at a set of lights here now and it is totally silent. I might as well be driving an EV. It's really easy to pull away from a set of lights using reasonable force in the accelerator, and the petrol engine still doesn't kick in. There's a full EV mode that you can use, but as soon as you kind of hard accelerate, that will disappear. Now, you don't really notice any massive extra weight. I have a Qashqai at home as our main family car, so I'm well used to driving that. That's the 1.3 petrol, which is not as well spec'd as this one, but wasn't as expensive either. Now, it is lovely being in these really high-spec surroundings in the Qashqai e-Power. That said, you can drop down a little bit. You don't have to go for this higher spec model of the car, and probably a lot of people will look at it and go 52,000 for a Qashqai.
That's an awful lot of money. And they're not wrong. It is. Where this car really will come into its own, however, is if you're someone who's just skeptical about EVs, if you're someone who's just skeptical about plug-in hybrids and that idea of, if you know yourself, you're not going to be someone who religiously plugs in the car every night, then something like a self-charging hybrid could be for you. That said, you have to trade off the difference. The car is dearer to buy, it will cost you less to run. Now, I've done a lot of mixed driving in this car this week. I've driven to Navan motorways, sustained motorway speed. I've done the school runs, gone to the shops, all the usual things that life throws up. And no matter how hard I try, this car is still refusing to budge over 7 litres per 100 kilometres. In fact, it's a very steady 6.8 litres per 100 kilometres, no matter what kind of driving I'm doing in it. That's where the big difference will be, because 1.3 petrol Qashqai, realistically, stop-start traffic, that Qashqai will do 10 litres per 100 kilometres all day long. So there is a bit of a saving in the running costs of petrol in this car. There's also an e-pedal. It's not quite Nissan Leaf e-pedal, but you press the nominal button down here, and when you lift your foot off the accelerator, the car will do a very severe amount of regen, which puts energy back into the battery, but also brings the car to a halt without you really having to press the brake pedal. You will towards the end of your journey where you need to actually stop, but it is a nice way to just lift off, have some braking, accelerate again. It's also less wear on discs. But it's the longest time I've lived with e-Power. I did drive it in the X-Trail in Slovenia last year, but again, you never really get a full feel of a car until you're living with it for a week. And it works. It absolutely works. It is very fuel efficient. It's a very smooth way to drive a car. I like it. I just think the price is a prohibitive factor. You know, it really is. And you can get a petrol Qashqai in the 30s. So it's going to really be a big fan. And there's no doubt they're out there. I think we're on Qashqai number 4 in my house. But the price of it will probably restrict you from going from this high spec version of the car. So you either drop down a grade, or you stick with a standard petrol and you up the grade. That's a choice for you. But if you're wondering, quite simply, what's the story with e-Power? Is it any use? I have to say, from a driving experience point of view, yes. And from a fuel efficiency point of view, yes. On both those fronts, e-Power, to my experience, is a very positive thing.
The Nissan Qashqai, it's still pretty much the creme de la creme of the crossovers. Yes, it's been around a while, but that's not a reason to hate it. And there's better competition than ever, because everyone wants a bit of the Qashqai's success. It's been the best-selling car for Nissan, after all. If you do want to save a bit on juice, you will on an e-Power, but the question for you today is, do you spend the extra outlay up front to get the e-Power model, or just stick with the petrol? That's for you to decide, and your bank balance. Any comments or questions, please do leave them down below, and I'll see you on the next one.